Welcome to the Museum at FIT's Fashion Culture Program Series. Tonight, it is our pleasure to present what is Caribbean fashion. We are honored that Janice Lawrence-Clarke, Nikhol Hing, and Richard Young will join us tonight. Janice is President and Creative Director of Caribbean American Fashion Exchange, also known as CAFÉ. Nikhol Hing is a fashion designer, a television personality, and an FIT graduate. And Richard Young is a stylist and production designer. Please join me in welcoming them.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to FIT. Welcome to our question, what is Caribbean fashion? And I have with me, of course, Miss Nikhol Hing. And Mr. Richard Young.
Pleasure to be here.
And before we begin, or I should say, to begin, we'll be finding out who are these people, what they doing here, where they come from, right? And I'm going to start off with Nikhol. Nikhol, I understand you were born in Guyana.
Correct. I'm Guyanese.
Did you hear the twang? All right. How old were you when you came here?
I was about 6 years old, but I was raised in a very, very Guyanese West Indian household, so that never left. I grew up in Brooklyn, so of course that never left.
Hello.
I have very Caribbean parents, so to this day, right. Even. So I'm very deeply rooted, and I visit home once a year, and I just did Carnival just in May.
Mashramani is what it's called?
No, Carnival. We have Carnival now.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay, hello.
And I played in the very first Carnival.
All right. Great. And as a matter of fact, one of the things we wanted to discuss, but we probably wouldn't get to, we'll see, is the correlation between Carnival costuming and fashion. You know, but we'll see.
Yes.
Right? And Richard, now you live in the Caribbean, correct?
Yes, I do.
Where?
I live in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, all right. We have Trinidad in the house.
But I like to stress that I'm a Caribbean.
Yes.
And I use Caribbean as a noun, and I represent the archipelago.
Lovely. You go up and down the Caribbean.
Yeah.
All right. Now, one of the things, I know, Nikhol, you attended FIT.
I did.
What did you study here?
Design and merchandise.
Design and merchandising. And Richard, what is your background?
Well, my background is really eclectic. I'm still a student of life. I'm a sociologist, an anthropologist, a literature buff, and history. So I went to UE and I studied sociology, French literature and language, and history, and fashion has become my métier. In all the ancillary roles, I can't thread a needle, but I can tell you what you should wear, what color you should wear, what silhouette you should wear, what details should be used on you, and I boast of Caribbean style.
You talk about the Caribbean aesthetic. What is that? How do you describe that?
Well, I actually have something that I wrote that I want to read, and so I have it there on my iPad.
Okay, modern technology.
Yeah, and this was actually submitted to the Fashion TT, which is a government arm that is doing the development of fashion in Trinidad and Tobago. So I just thought I'd say it so we can share that here, if I am as thing as I want to be.
Okay, so this is the fashion aesthetic, and as a matter of fact, one of the reasons I reached out to Richard is because he travels up and down the Caribbean and he talks about the Caribbean aesthetic. So we thought, well, who would be the better person to have come and talk about this, right?
Yeah, so just a little bit of prose, if you want to call it that. It's our style of living, our lifestyle, our very ethos, our every essence, our way of communicating, confronting, creating. It's our compelling trademark. It's our collective consciousness. It's our consummate beauty, unapologetic, luminescent, and existential. It's more than our art, it's our artfulness. It's more than our culture, it's our culturing. It's more than our costume, it's our customizing. It's more than our fashion, it's our fashioning. It's our sensibility. It's more than our design, it's our designation. It's more than our look, it is our brand. The Caribbean aesthetic precedes us. It exists as our very own Aphrodite, influencing our tastes, choices, and our preferences. It's an accumulated set of inspirations that is at one and the same time indigenous and ingenious. It is the Bacchus that rules our festivals. It is that intrinsic intangible, that elemental ether, that idiosyncratic issue, that essential effervescence, all of which presupposes our soul and characterize our identity. It is in our DNA, in our sensing and our sensation, in our pride and perspective, in our gestures, gesticulations, manners, and mannerisms. It's our mood and method, our pose, our posture, our expressions, and our expressiveness. A vernacular in motion, a colloquial corresponding, a dialectal methodology, all manifest with an individualistic signaling, an independent system, an innovative signature, an idiomatic syntax, which others revere, within which we revel, with which we resonate, to which we reverberate, out of which we resource, upon which we reckon. Through this interaction, this interconnection, this interrelating, we become and bespeak the quintessential Caribbean, which engages as it evolves, and this is our aesthetic. We must acknowledge, appreciate, applaud its essence in an effort to strengthen its resolve and invigorate its presence.
That is quite a mouthful. I am sure that you can hear the sociology and anthropology and the literature in this wheel. Now, thank you, Richard, for telling us this aesthetic. Nikki, do you still have this aesthetic?
What do you say after that?
I know. Right? Does your Caribbean aesthetic influence?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, in a plainer term, it allows me to play with patterns, and it allows me to see color differently than what it's actually taught here in the U.S.
Right.
So what would be basic, fashion here, being from the Caribbean, it allows me to just play with different patterns and colors, and I just see things a little bit different. As you mentioned, the costumes, in a lot of fashion that I've used or in the past. I play with feathers, I play with colors, I play with sequins, I play with, crystals and different things. So I think that just, I'm also being raised in Brooklyn, I can't just claim Guyana.
Right.
I literally grew up Trini, I grew up Jamaican, I grew up Grenadian. So, I've embraced all of those cultures, and I think that it's also just helped me in fashion, period. And like I said, I just don't see basic fashion anymore, or period. So I think that is a gift to have both worlds.
Right, right. And also, being from the Caribbean has been lived in by very many different cultures. What some people may not know is that the Caribbean is divided into like 4 major language groups. So we have the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, and the English-speaking Caribbean. Now, in the Caribbean, there's a wonderful blend of all these cultures and people, as my dear Nikki, right? Would you tell us, well, what is your mix?
Okay, so my dad is full Chinese, but he's Guyanese.
Right.
And my mom she's Indian, which is an Arawak, so it's a native Indian. She's Portuguese, and she's black.
Okay? And in Trinidad and Tobago, we call that Callaloo. Okay?
We call it buck in Guyana. Buck.
Buck. Oh, the Buck Indian.
Right, I'm a buck girl. That's what they
Okay,
call it.
okay. So, I mean, we're constantly learning, as Richard says, right?
Yes.
And so when you do your designs, you incorporate even your ethnicity and
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Okay, well, I mean, we have some fashion here. I think Richard brought some.
Yes.
Yes, I brought some fashion. We have 2 segments for you. It's really multi-layered, very eclectic, very syncretic styles coming from across the region. So we like to show you a bit.
Should I ask them?
Yes.
Oh, you want to see some Caribbean fashion? All right, show them.
Okay, we're going to show you. And this is quintessential mailing. Mailing Isao. Minimalist, clean, paying a lot of attention to detail. These both looks in white are from mailing. Another master designer awarded this at Caribbean Fashion Week or Premier Fashion Week in the Caribbean in Kingston, Jamaica. Mailing. So this is a snippet of the fashion from the cross-cultural space that is the Caribbean. That is our fashion capsule 1. We have more excitement coming for you.
Thank you so much. Do we get music for the ladies to walk off? The ladies and gents?
Thank you,
or? Okay, fine. So all of these looks, some were from Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. You said St. Kitts.
St. Vincent.
St.
Yes,
Vincent.
St. Vincent.
Right.
Yes.
We can buy these things here. Can't we sell these things here?
Yes, of course we can.
Wouldn't you like to buy these things here? Yeah.
Because it's no longer the look of the Caribbean that we might have had before when there was this flea market kind of expression of who we are. There is a lot more finish. Those garments could be worn on the wrong side. Most of the designers have upgraded their education in fashion design, and they use a lot of technology in the manufacture of the designs. There is a greater aesthetic. There's a feel about what you do. Collections are now done. It's not clothes making to cover naked people. So each one of the collections is a tribute to something that is inspired by the space that they live in. And so therefore, that's where I connect to them. I connect with the storytelling. The anecdotal quality of Caribbean people is part of the Caribbean aesthetic. So each one is textured, the silhouettes, the details, the proportion, the balance. All of that comes from an understanding of who you are and referencing your space.
Okay, so talking about quality, texture, because you mentioned some of these things can be worn inside out. Where does manufacturing take place?
Well, we still work at ateliers. Most of the designers work at ateliers attached to their spaces. Some of them have shops. I think at this point it is a niche market, and they need to develop their unique selling point and position their wares where people's interests in what you might call bohemian, eclectic, syncretic fashion tastes abound, and that's where they are. They are pushing towards that kind of manufacture. It is not about mass manufacturing. It's not about losing the craftsmanship for the sake of doing more. It is more qualitative than quantitative, and that's where we're at right now in the development of the Caribbean fashion industry. Targeting what you do and reaching out to that person or that client base that is attracted to wearing something unique and distinctive. And that's what I think the Caribbean aesthetic helps with in shaping, because as long as you apply yourself to that, you're going to end up with something that is different, and it will show the diversity.
Nikhol?
Mine takes place in Miami, in my home. Okay. But I'm fortunate enough to have a Caribbean team. So, and we do travel a lot. So we're constantly seeing what's new in the Caribbean, and we just, it takes place all in Miami. I'm not as fortunate to design in Trinidad or to, but when I do travel, I do, I collect what I can, and I go back with that in my thoughts, and I take it back to Florida or New York, wherever I'm designing, and I sketch when I can. So when I do get back, those things are, fresh in my mind. So, but that's a...
But that is what it's also, I think, when I say it is an indigenous practice, it's instinctive as a Caribbean person to be like a gatherer. It's both Indo-influenced and Afro-influenced. You gather not only seeds and beads from the forest, and you don't only layer things and create texture. You're constantly gathering, and therefore you can visit, just as Nikhol is saying, and apply yourself to the gathering, and then implement. One instance, when I was in Martinique, I saw Jean-Paul Gaultier in the market. I walked up to him and said, "Excuse me, you is Jean-Paul?" Because I got it.
Only a bold-faced Trini could do that.
And he said, yes. I said, what are you doing here? And he was in the market where all the seeds, beads, stones, shells, that practice of gathering and then layering it as collage art and giving a new texture. I think the surface treatment is what we as Caribbean people bring to the fashion world, the texturing, because we are not fortunate yet with mills to get your fabrics produced for you. You use what exists and you build on it. You know, as I tell people, we are a space where we created the only musical instrument of the 20th century from nothing. Right. So we always innovative, you're always inventive, you're always imaginative, you're always applying beauty and creating beauty from nothing.
Absolutely.
And that is what I think is particularly distinctive about Caribbean culturing.
But, and also, it's interesting that you mentioned seeing Jean-Paul Gaultier, because we know that for a long time, the fashion world has been influenced by Caribbean culture. You know, just without Caribbean culture being recognized for this contribution. But we also do have some designers that are from the Caribbean that some people know, that many people know, such as, well, the late Oscar de la Renta, now the late Fabrice Simon. Well, I should say Oscar de la Renta was from the Dominican Republic. Fabrice Simon was Haitian. Yeah. He used to do these fabulous beaded gowns. You know, we have Adolfo, who's Cuban. Narciso Rodriguez. Right? Stella
Jean,
right?
Haitian in Milan.
Carly Kushney from Jamaica. And these are Caribbean Americans that are making a mark. Now, what can we do to get the Caribbeans I use it as a noun as well. What can we do to get the Caribbeans that are living in the Caribbean to get onto the global stage like that, utilizing the texture and utilizing the culture? How can we?
My purpose, or what has become my vocation, is to make you love you. Post-colonial societies live in a state of self-hate to some degree. You know, there's always an apologetic feel about speaking of your culturing and not brandishing it. And I have learned to brandish who I am unapologetically. And so therefore the storytelling of who you are needs to apply itself. And gone are the days that Caribbean style is a Hawaiian shirt, a Panama hat, and a Bermuda shorts.
True.
And those geographic adjectives do not refer to any part of the Caribbean.
No, they don't.
So what was going on was somebody else's version of who we are that we were responding to. So now we have to come forward like these designers and make a statement, whether it is just in simplistic lines, whether it is in textile coloring, whether it is in surface treatment, whether it is in doing crochet, whether it's in doing details like the applique art, and make new texture and profess it to the world.
I agree with him. I also feel that we aren't taught to come out of our shell. Right. We are taught to be quiet, to be seen, not heard. You know, that's been the Caribbean way, and I think I can speak for almost all of us when I say that. So, I think it starts with us, the ones that do have a voice, and that are able to show others that they can also have a voice and be seen and heard, and their fashion should be, brought to the forefront and not just designing for your friends, in your little, community. So I agree with 2,000%, but it definitely starts with the self-love and just the encouragement from one another to say you can, you do have a good eye, you should do this, you should, Unfortunately, I don't feel that we support each other enough.
Yes.
I feel that as Caribbean people, we can be very selfish sometimes. And I don't think we should be like that. I think that we should always, all of us should come together and encourage one another, because it's not a lot of us doing things in the forefront. And there probably is so many of us that really are doing it, but just not for people to see.
So there needs to be a psyche shift. A psyche
Definitely.
shift in the loving of self. It's not just the designer, because we always look to the metropole. That is what is post-colonial thinking. Post-colonial thinking means that we apply ourselves to the large cities. We don't even have enough intra-regionality. I work the region, and I don't even meet other people working the region. The people in the region are not even aware of each other's music.
Right.
They are not aware of the designer's work.
Right.
They go online, they buy what is abroad, and that is not to denigrate what is abroad, but there are people who are pursuing excellence in their craft, and we have to buy from each other, and we need to share with each other. So that's what I do. I make them unearth what is positive in themselves, in the presenting and merchandising of their wares.
And you both have raised points that I've thought of, because Nikhol, you mentioned, the responsibility of us in the diaspora. I call it in the diaspora. And I am thinking that if people in the Caribbean see people outside of the Caribbean doing things, they would know that, oh, I could do that too. Hey, okay, so I have to go into my lang. Hey, but that is that girl. I know she from since she's small. And look, she doing this. I could do that too.
Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I feel it's almost like a responsibility
It is.
that we have, to do this. And Richard, as you mentioned,
Branding is what I want to come to.
quite
You have to think of
important.
yourself as a brand.
Exactly.
And therefore, when you're a brand, you have a responsibility to use systematic approaches and rigorous approaches in the deliverables. So those are the things that we need to start working on
Yes.
as designers.
Yes.
Responsibility to delivery dates, responsibility to the client base, responsibility to what I call the Caribbean aesthetic. I don't like to hear designers saying, I just happen to live in the Caribbean, but I don't want to be known as a Caribbean designer. And you wouldn't believe how many of them say that. And you would talk to an Italian designer, and that is in the forefront of what he's saying. I'm Italian, I'm French, I'm Japanese, I do British bespoke work. And that is branded, that nationality is branded.
Exactly.
I mean, they have a longer history. I mean, it's 600-700 years of developing the arts. And as I say, I'm a history buff, so I have studied French history for years. So when Louis XIV's court started the Academy of the Arts,
Right.
and you stood in 5th position, 3rd position, and 4th position as a matter of course. And I mean, that discipline, they have had hundreds of years. We are now coming out of a situation where a Creole culture is now forming. So we are new, but you need to apply that discipline, that rigor, that systematic approach to your deliverables. And I think that's what is going to make it business and therefore industry eventually.
You're touching on both the business of fashion as well as the emotion, because you mentioned identification and self-identity. It was brought to my attention by Ken Downing, who's a friend of the school. He's a graduate of the school, the fashion director for Neiman Marcus, when I was talking to him and saying, oh, but Ken, you know, June is Caribbean American Heritage Month, and you can do this fabulous window and feature Caribbean American designers in the store. You already have some because you've got Carly Cushnie, you've got De La Renta, etc. And he said, but Janice, do they self-identify as Caribbeans? And that was like an aha moment for me, because I had not too long before met a designer that attended this school who's from Trinidad and Tobago, but who told me that he didn't want to be known as a Caribbean designer. And that hurt me.
Yeah, it's very common, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's very, very common. It's very sad.
Why do you think there's a stigma?
I know that now in the late 2000s, it's actually an honor for people to now recognize and to, you know, be proud of who they are. But growing up, it wasn't. Growing up, it was, you're not from here, so you shouldn't be, you know, you should get a job and you should work a 9 to 5, and your parents will teach you that. And it's not just, you know, the outside, it's your own family that's telling you what you should and shouldn't do. So for me, my dad was an accountant. He came from Guyana, was an accountant. My mom was a nurse, and they also expected me to go into the medical field.
Right.
Or to do something, become a lawyer. So imagine me coming out with all of these bright colors, and I'm cutting up shirts, and I'm making stuff over the things that she threw away in the trash, and she's, what are you doing? You know, this isn't what you do. So from early, we're taught to not express ourselves. So now we're hidden, and now we hide our gems and our creativity and our dreams, and it's just passed down generations and generations. So it's not just me and my family, it's a lot of people that are, you know. So I think that now in the 2000s, now it's like you can be proud of where you are, where you're from, and your heritage. And I think that I think it kind of took other countries to start being proud of themselves, and now we're like, hey, they're proud, we should be proud too.
Right.
Yeah, that has been a pattern with Caribbean life,
fashion.
that we do what we are told to do. And identity branding is very important to me. I came from a family of unionists, so almost from a Marxist perspective, we spoke about democratizing and the proletariat and applying yourself to more people and making them part of. So my understanding of fashion started from there, making sense. There must be a rationale. There must be an ideal to which you aspire. You can't be just making clothes. You can't be just looking in a magazine and doing a polka dot dress. You have to be saying something. You're part of the creative sphere, and artists have a responsibility to move us forward. So that's critical to the development of a culture.
Sure.
So that's really important to me, the identity branding aspect. So that is what I kind of unearth, as I said, with a lot of the creatives. And I believe that fashion is a corollary for the development of the creative industry.
Oh my.
It is not just about doing pretty things. It's about aligning with the performance, the art, the painter, the sculptor, the architect, everybody who shapes how we perceive the world. And that's what we need to share.
Well, as you're saying that, I think you have some more that you want to share.
Yes.
So,
of course.
all you want to see more? All right.
Yes.
Show us more.
So we'll show a fashion segment now. The last time I was playing on a kind of tribal feel with that raw, basic black and white with a touch of red, as you would have noticed. Now there's a lot more color, a lot more of the Caribbean spirit, a lot more of the Caribbean joie de vivre.
And where are these designers from?
All through the Caribbean.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll
You could
identify
tell
as
us
they come.
countries. All right, so let's see some more.
patterned fabrics and using some of the silhouettes that come from the continent and applied to us in the Caribbean.
Wow.
And you know, in the Caribbean, there's a little more meat on the body.
They love meat.
So the plus size is part of our Caribbean aesthetic, part of our silhouette, part of our style.
Definitely.
And here is a quintessential design coming from another master. This is Heather June.
These are beautiful. Now, when we talk about the business of fashion, how does one get this merchandise? Are there websites? I mean,
Well, most of them have websites. Most of them are now applying themselves to social media, you know, because that is what it is. It's an incremental way of accessing the world. So most of them have websites. Most of them have Instagram accounts. Most of them have Facebook accounts. Using the eponymous labels, most of them go by their brand names. You know, the cloth is Robert Young. Mary Frances, actually, is Dr. Marilyn Walker, who is present here. There she is over there.
Hi, Doc.
She flew in just for the show. And Claudia Pegas goes by her name. Heather Jones goes by her name. It's one of the easiest way to brand self, sometimes, I think. I've encouraged some of them to use their names. We have to shortcut the measure to get access to the world's attention. So sometimes branding yourself under a label that is not quickly connecting with who you are pushes you further away from the access, you know?
can you find this merchandise in any boutiques here in the States as yet?
Some of them, I know for sure that Heather markets in peculiar shops throughout the region. Claudia Pegas, like in St. Bart's and so. My brother has clothes in Toronto, San Francisco, that's Robert Young.
Robert Young.
Yeah. But so wherever there is that eclecticism, that sense of wanting that diversity, something unique, something that represents some kind of hybrid quality, a conversation piece, I think these designers represent that. And this is new. And I mean, this platform, speaking here at FIT, is definitely and certainly a step up to get some of these people don't let anything out of their sight. So I have been very fortunate to be able to bring some of these garments to show us here in New York.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Fabulous models. Call the names of the brands again as they go. Claudia Pegas, Heather
Claudia
Jones.
Pegas, Heather Jones, The Cloth, Mary Frances Designs, Marlon George, Dow Creations. He works on a particular menswear line using a lot of texture, Afro prints, Indo prints, and creating silhouettes that have international appeal, but definitely quintessentially Caribbean.
Thank you, Richard. Nikhol, what advice could you give as far as these designers getting their things into boutiques?
Consistency. You can't give up. You know, not everything is for everyone. You just have to really believe in what you do, and you have to be consistent. You have to just, I don't take no for an answer. I keep coming.
Right.
I keep coming, and I keep coming.
Right.
I don't stop. And I think that everyone should apply that don't stop method
Right.
and just keep coming, and it gets better.
I just gave you a card. We have some questions. Would you read that question and answer it for me, please?
What challenges do you face as being a Caribbean designer in America?
That's a good one, right?
I want to say earlier on in my designing career, I had more challenges because there's so many designers. Period. Sometimes it just seems like people just wake up and this is what they decide to do. And for people that are really born with it, we have to get through all of the posers.
Right, right.
And then, to just even be recognized, and then to be recognized as a Caribbean designer. So, just it's a challenge just being a designer, period, because everyone has their style, and now it's to get everyone to notice what you're doing. I think it's a little easier for me now, only because I've worked as a fashion editor. I was able to slip my things in, magazines, because I was a fashion editor. So it'd be, Catherine Molendrino. I'm pulling pieces from Diane van Fossenberg, and I slip in Nikhol Hing.
Right.
And then people are like, hey, I like that. Where can I get that? So it was a little bit easier for me, but in the beginning, not so much, because I was doing things from scratch and trying to be noticed. And again, in a world of thousands of designers that do have a lot going on and pretty good ideas, and you're just a little, pea in a pod trying to be recognized, it is difficult. But again, I just kept going, and I used my background, my fashion background, my editorial background to slip in my pieces, and then, now other things, and I have a big social media following now, so it's a little bit easier now, and which is one of the reasons why I'm such a big advocate for Caribbean fashion and culture, because I have a platform now. So, for me, if you can utilize me for anything, especially, I'm for it.
I'm so glad you said that.
I'm for it.
Because, yes, because as you were saying that, I'm thinking, they should be dressing you,
Yeah.
I mean, she does have her own line, but you would wear others.
Absolutely.
And Caribbean designers could be dressing Caribbean actors and singers and so forth. So that's one of the things I would love to see come out of this. I have another question. Who are your favorite Caribbean fashion icons? Both of you don't jump and answer.
Well, I definitely, some of the designers I've brought, they have made a mark. Heather Jones, I think, represents the lifestyle and our culture in the texturing and in the fluid silhouettes that she creates. Mei-Ling, I love her simplicity and her meticulous attention to detail. The cloth, because I love my brother's Picasso-esque applique. And that texture definitely is a signal to who we are. We are like layered people. I definitely like Claudia Pegas because, again, she has an eye for detail and for creating a sophistication and an elegance.
Great fabric mixes.
Yeah, and using fabrics that you may not necessarily think of using, and coming up with these looks. So those are the designers I like, and because, as Nikhol says, they are consistent, they are constantly marketing, they are constantly positioning themselves. That is what you need to do, because you have to think of, as we said before, of yourself as a brand. You have to position yourself, align with other brands, like aligning with the Nikhol Hing brand, so you dress her.
Exactly.
You know, and so a lot of the performers of the region even should be styled by designers.
Of course.
The correlation should be there. And that's not naturally there, because I make a joke and say people sing Trinity to the bone, and you have on an ice hockey t-shirt, and you have a hat belonging to a basketball team here, you know, and you're on stage singing Trinity to the bone.
Makes no
and
sense.
Sometimes, and the choice of fabric, sometimes there's synthetic fabrics that don't belong to who you are, and you know, and all of those things. I think we need to have an eco-friendly kind of thinking. You need to have a philosophy. All people of the art need to have a philosophy in the moving forward of whatever they're contributing to the world. And if you have that, I think people can take you seriously. That's where the buy-in is. Let me buy you. Your name must precede you, you know, and I buy into the whole thing that you're offering.
Well, that leads right into, well, a rehashing of some of the work that was being done, because I too remember sitting and talking about wearing Kangol caps in 90-degree weather, and that's like, what? You know, and this is years ago. So it seems as though, I like to call it a Caribbean Renaissance, a renaissance in fashion, in Caribbean fashion, that needs to come about. And the fact that we've begun this discussion, I think would lead directly into that rebirth. Right? I have another question. How big is the Fashion Week in the Caribbean?
Well, there are many fashion weeks, and fashion weeks have become marketing platforms. I have been responsible for many of them, and I've worked in many of them. And even though we have some continental brothers in terms of French Guyana, and Suriname, the Dutch, French, and the English-speaking Guyanas, they are part of it because of our historical similarity. I've worked in all of those regions doing fashion events. The fashion weeks allow for other like-minded people to come in to nourish the building of the industry, for intellectual integrity and for institution strengthening. I think it's very important to harness and corral all these people in one space for discussion and for furtherance and for advancement in the making and the styling. And that is what fashion weeks do. There's Caribbean Fashion Week, but there are several in the region.
There's Caribbean Fashion Week in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Right? That's one of the longest running ones.
There's Guyana Fashion Week, there's Suriname Fashion
Week.
Week, there's French Guyana Fashion Week, Antigua Fashion Week, and Barbados Fashion Week. Most of them have it. And what I have encouraged is that even though they are branded by the nationality, they need to always incorporate other Caribbeans.
Of course.
Because that is what it must be.
Of course.
It cannot be insular. The insularity is what is keeping us back. It is consolidation for our way forward. Because the world sees those sprinkling rocks down the Caribbean Sea as one space, the Caribbean. You know?
Exactly.
So how do we get just one big fashion week? And where would we do that?
Well, I think that I look at my life as a chart, and the fact that I'm here now, after 30 years, even though I'm not 30 years old. After 30 years for me to reach here, and I have worked the Caribbean from the Bahamas to the Guyanas. And I do things in Montreal, Toronto, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. This is my first incursion in the fashion scenario here in New York. I've just visited before. It is time to go to the diaspora spaces where other Caribbean creatives are and start to align with them and position for things like this, for the awareness, because it's a building of awareness. We are way off. We are less than 100 years in the development of our arts much less fashion. You know, and there was something I said some years ago when I did Fashion Week Trinidad and Tobago. I said, Coskel becomes couture. Now, the word Coskel is a term used in the Caribbean to mean garish and to mean that it is inappropriate. And that was one of the things that Nikhol talked about. When we were younger, we were told what is right and what isn't. So that when Calypsonians went out into the world and they wore the suits and they went to London, they decided to wear a gold shirt under it, or a pink shirt, or whatever they felt to represent this vibrancy that they were bringing to the world. And people looked at it as inappropriate and Coskel. And I thought we needed to claim it. We needed to claim that difference that we were
that style.
Intrinsically and idiosyncratically bringing to the world, and that's our style. You know, and a lot of the stylists in the world, a lot of them have Caribbean referencing. When I look at it, I can see the textures and how the accessories are used and how the colors of the makeup are used, and so all of that is part of that miscegenation that comes from the Caribbean. That's what I'm proud of, and that's what I think the next stage is. Coming to the spaces to bring the story and bring the, so I'm like Atlas with all the designers on my back, and I'm coming here to say, we good, we ready, we need to start being seen, we need to start being sold here, and so that's the new stage. The new stage is coming into the first world, because not all the time the first world was coming to us.
And which is, you know, another question, where can I buy Caribbean fashions in New York? And as you mentioned, coming to the first world. What I think of when I hear this question in what you just said is the way when we leave New York and go home, we want to take the whole of New York in the suitcase to carry home, right? But when we leave home and come back to New York, we don't bring anything.
Tambourine ball.
Maybe a tambourine ball.
I do. I'm at customs all for hours.
But you know what I mean? We don't bring clothes to sell.
Yeah.
You know, so we like to take things from here to there, but the things that we bring back would be like comfort food. You know, as opposed to
Achar.
Exactly, right? As opposed to things that could actually help develop sustainability for the artists, right?
Yeah.
So, Nikhol, to answer also your question as to what next with Caribbean designers in New York, this is what we're here to talk about as well, you know, to see how we move forward. We're looking forward to 2019 being a year of seeing the Caribbean on display again. And Maria, the hurricane of last year, really did quite a bit to put the Caribbean on the spot, right? So because of that natural disaster, we were pushed into the forefront. And I feel we really need to take advantage of it and go with it, right?
I'm in.
Yeah, there's some watchwords I also would like to say, which I encourage people with. Entrepreneurship is a whole system, you know, and that entrepreneurship is what has to be encouraged. Innovation, you have to constantly be innovative, which is what Nikhol was talking about. Keeping that edge. You have to keep the edge to be sustainable. And if you apply yourself to a philosophy that there's a purpose for why you're doing what you're doing, I think that is going to serve the future generation. So those are the watchwords that I try to push: innovation, entrepreneurship, sustainability, and make sure it can service people down the line in the development of the industry.
Can I add one other thing? Not totally relying on the government to manage your business, okay? And I feel that often we, in the Caribbean, leave it up to the government. So if the government doesn't do this, that means you don't do that, you know? And I know that, of course, the government is necessary, especially when it comes to maybe opening doors for being able to get your raw supplies, your fabrics and notions and what have you, making trade easier, having the kinds of loans that are necessary for, for these kinds of small businesses. But at the same time, you as a designer have to do the research, liaise with people in the different markets outside of the Caribbean, so that you're not doing things on your own, and create a marketing strategy that is consistent, that is holistic, that doesn't end when you just come and do one show, right? Which is something that I've noticed quite a few designers come up, they do a show, and then you don't see anything from them anymore.
Yeah, so networking is important. My involvement in the business happened almost accidentally and incidentally. I started off as a model. I was much smaller than this. And I was used to be by sculptors wanted me. I had good bones, and I said, okay, do what you need to do. And I won some competitions, and I said, you know what? I need to come off of the stage. And I need to find a way to stay in the Caribbean and make sense of this. All my friends left in the 80s and say, you staying in that Maya? There's nothing that can happen there. And I say, you know what? I go be a big shark here. All you go and be a guppy outside there. I go be a big shark right in this water here. So I have learned how to do strategy. I write proposals to governments. I investigate how to get corporate social responsibility involved in the rollout of the fashion.
Good.
So those are the things I have brought to the table.
And we will want you to continue doing that.
But that's what I do.
We need much money to get this done.
Yeah, because you have to align with environmental issues. You have to align with ethical issues. You have to align with other things. Designers cannot just want to make clothing. You can't just only want to sell clothes. If you look like you're responsible to development of civilization, as big as that sounds, and you get a specific angle in, get a portal into that, that's what I try to shape. Okay. And so each one of the showcases, there's a particular flavor. That is still Caribbean, but it's different from the next, so that everybody has their uniqueness.
And on that note, because I'm getting the,
Wine up.
Yes, I have one last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nikki for her last words. Someone says, do you have any advice for a budding designer? Yes, I do. There's a school called the Fashion Institute of Technology. We happen to be right here. They cover the business of fashion, all right? So talk to an advisor and figure out what classes you should take, okay? Also, there's a scholarship that's about. It's called the CAFÉ Scholarship, the Caribbean American Fashion Exchange Scholarship. It's particularly for Caribbean students who live in the Caribbean to come and study at FIT. So if, that is of your ilk, give. Go onto the website, right, at fitnyc.edu/give and designate CAFÉ, all right? We want to be able to give these scholarships. Okay, so that's my personal plug. And now I'm gonna ask Nikhol, what are your last words? What's next for Nikhol Hing?
I mean, just sitting here right now, I'm just like, my wheels are turning and turning, and I'm like, Fashion Week. And I'm thinking, what can I do? So I would like for all of you and you to possibly sit down and let's elaborate on what we can do moving forward. Can we make a Caribbean Fashion Week
here in
one specific place? It can be in the Caribbean. Let's get out some great designers. Let's I think it's gonna have to start with us. Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone else is gonna come and maybe, but I don't think so. So I think that I don't mind using my platform for that. I'm actually very proud, and I would love to do it if we can get the Caribbean designers to come out and to believe in what they do, and just basically, I think it's just gonna start with us. So I'm all ears, and I'm definitely gonna be thinking about what's next or how I can make something. I'm thinking about going on my social media today and actually talking
You better.
to some people. Like, come on, if you guys are designers, reach out to me and we can start there.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I
Yeah, that's great.
I applaud that. Well, I would say that I'm agreeing with Nikhol, and I feel it is ripe that we bring them to the spaces for the access. Doing the work there, I've done it for 30 years, every single day. That's all I do. I don't do it as something on the side. I write stories, I do photographic layouts, I style windows, I dress models, I train models, everything that is ancillary to the development and merchandising of our branding is what I have done. And I think I needed to land here to feel the vibe of this space and to want to bring them, because part of the showing of it is showing the whole lifestyle of the Caribbean, the culture of the Caribbean. That's how the fashion has to be projected. We don't have to just do it the way that has been designed.
Right.
We have to create a new way. And I want to be part of that movement. I want to be a part of saying this is we, and we like we self and we showing off.
Yes, and thank you. What's the Caribbean word? Zante, we showing off. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you how happy I am to be sitting on this stage. The last time I actually walked this stage was in the fall of 1980 for a student show. Yeah. Yes, I'm an FIT grad too. Fashion buying and merchandising. And I am so very happy to have here with me this evening Nikhol Hing and Richard Young to talk about Caribbean fashion, because this has been a passion of mine. At times I called it an albatross. At times I begged the Lord to take it away from me. At times I behaved like Jonah. And, but I'm really happy that we've reached this place. And we can continue to do something to uplift all of us. So I thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful evening. Stay in touch. Music? Oh, my dress is by Dominique LaRoche of Trinidad and Tobago.